You're listening to TSN, a division of the Gameloft Broadcast Network.
All right, it is the Open Bar on TSN. As promised, we're going to try and get, oh, there it is, finally. We're going to try and get Mr. Georgeson on the phone here. Bear with me. I'm trying a couple of different things here. If this first one doesn't work, I do have a backup. So, but hopefully this first one will work. Let me just double check the number. All right. Cross your fingers and pray with me.
Dialpad.com, a Cisco-powered network.
Cool. It's always a good sign.
Hello, this is Dave.
Dave, it's Pubknight from TSN. How are you, sir?
How are you doing?
I am doing just fine and dandy. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Hang on just a second. Let me switch channels on my phone here. Just
okay.
Right a second.
Oh, Dave has REIT cordless phone.
Okay, you there?
I am there.
That's funny. We just got a little bit of static, I guess.
Well, I'm probably going to sound not great to you because I'm calling you through dial-pad. So.
Oh, okay.
But
as long as you can hear me.
Yeah, you're sounding fine. Your volume is good. Thank you as always for joining us. As promised, we had taken a couple calls before you came on. Some people asking me, what is this interview going to be like? Are you going to be asking him any real questions? Or are you just going to kiss his ass? So I said, well, there's going to be some introductory ass kissing, and then of course followed by real questions. So this would be the ass kissing portion of the show. Thanks a lot for.
I pretty much told the guys I was going to get flamed tonight.
I don't. You aren't going to get flamed. We're gonna we'll prep you up a little bit. We're gonna ask some questions, and I mean you're a friend of the show. You've been around for a while. You and I have had the chance to talk a few times. There are some sort of tougher questions, like honest questions that I'm going to ask you, and I think that
sure.
you, from what I know of you, you aren't going to have a hard time, asking those. I'm not going to ask you stuff like, WTF? Why doesn't the game work? I mean, we'll try and do it in a constructive manner and field questions, but people have questions that they want addressed, and I don't think that you would have a problem doing that. But
no problem.
Some of the things I want to talk about, sort of as a setup. First of all, and because this is the first time we've actually had a chance to talk since official release. So,
yeah.
How do you feel the initial release went? As sort of an open question. Are you happy with it? Are you unhappy with it? What are some of the bumps? What are some of the things you wish could have gone better? What do you think went well?
Well, quite honestly, we seriously underestimated how many different compatibility issues there were out there in the world. Well, you know how long we worked on this game and how hard we worked on it. It's extraordinarily frustrating to work on something for 2 years and then put it out there and have some errors in the game that you just essentially have no control over.
Right.
Like for instance, when we first went out and we had that big rash of unhandled exception error. Well, that was just aggravating because what was really happening was, the Tribes 2 first aid utility we put out there.
Right.
The reason why we put it out there was because people, when they're installing from the CD to the hard drive, somehow on some hardware, and we still don't know why, people were copying the files across and getting incorrect CRC values on the files. So what was happening was they were trying to run the game, and their files just flat weren't correct, and they would get all these weird-ass errors all over the place. So that's why we put out that first aid utility so that people could essentially examine their installation and find out whether it was correct. And 9 times out of 10, when they do that, it gets rid of the errors, which is just aggravating as hell because it wasn't our code. But yet, we're having to deal with these errors all the time, and tech support's phones are lighting up all the time, and it gives us a really bad name.
Now, is that something that you were finding was occurring on a particular series of CD-ROMs, or was it just sort of a random thing, or no real rhyme or reason for it?
Well, at first we thought it was SecuROM, and we were blaming SecuROM. But quite honestly, once we did some testing, and some of these guys, when they were copying from because we talked to a lot of customers when this was happening, we were working directly with you guys out there. And what was happening was we sent them unprotected builds that didn't have any SecuROM. And they were still having the same problems.
Okay.
And we flat don't understand why it would happen with our disk and not like Microsoft Word or whatever it is. I don't know whether our game is just simply more intolerant to CRC values because our patching system requires you to have the exact CRC value and maybe that's not true of other software. I don't know. I'm just talking out of my hat right now.
Right.
But we honestly don't know why these installations are going incorrectly. So now what we've done is, to solve this, is we've built that first aid utility straight into the installer. So that when eventually we'll start remastering the CD, and when that happens, people won't have these problems anymore. But for right now, there's still product out in the channel, and anybody that buys the game is going to get these issues. And so we're trying to make sure that everybody and his brother has the first aid utility, because, well, this kind of error is just flabbergasting.
Right. And this is something that we didn't, as you know, I was on beta and whatnot, and this is something that just didn't come up at any point in the beta sort of meta process. This is something that came up that didn't start appearing until wide release, right?
Yeah, and people were given it, well, I think I've been given just about every kind of grief that can be given at this point. And they were saying, well, why didn't you do like a Quake 3 when they did the open test where they have like 100,000 people testing? And yeah, that would have shown it up. But quite honestly, we didn't have a cut-down version of the executable, and we honestly didn't have the time to make something like that. I wish that we did, because we'd have the demo done already.
Right.
But at the same time, we were having to have a 400 or 500 megabyte download, and that just wasn't going to happen on 100,000 people. And besides that, we really had security concerns. Sierra is extremely concerned about the security because of the debacle that happened with Tribes 1.
Now, one of the things I did want to ask, and this could be sort of the early tough question, is people talking about, well, if the game was this buggy, why release it? Maybe you can describe the way the decision gets made on when to release. Sort of who makes that decision? At what stage does it decide to get shipped out the door? Right.
Well, every product. I don't care how good the game is or whether it's a database product or whatever it is, ships with known bugs. That's just a reality of life. And what you do is when you get down to the end, what you're doing is balancing financial need versus the remaining bugs. And you look at the list of the known bugs and you say, is this a big deal or is it, something that's something that's livable, or is it something that, because we have the auto update system, is it something that we can just fix right away? And out of a list of known bugs, the ones we knew about, we honestly didn't have that many issues. And I know there's a lot of people out there that aren't going to believe me, but when we released this game, we were convinced that the Voodoo cards worked well. And the weird part is, there's a lot of Voodoo customers out there that agree with us.
Right.
But there's a hell of a lot of them that are really unhappy, too. So, it's like, you've probably seen my news article about the 75,000 possible configurations of the PC.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know whether you have or not.
Yep.
It's actually a lot more than that. It depends upon, what's your motherboard? Did you flash your BIOS or not? How much RAM do you have? What brand is the RAM? Did you get good RAM or bad RAM? What's your CD drive? What's your hard drive? How fast is your hard drive? Et cetera, et cetera. It just goes on and on and on and on. And it's why developers are pulling their hair out right now and saying, screw it, I'm going to do the Xbox.
And that's a really good point for the people that obviously sort of almost everybody I'm assuming has heard about the Xbox. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail, but just very, very quickly, why does the Xbox concept appeal to developers? And how would this, if Tribes 2 is an Xbox title, how would that make things different on the rollout?
Well, Tribes 2 would be a completely different game if it was an Xbox title, because the entire game would have to be able to be played from the actual controller.
Right.
They're going to ship and they're going to have an optional they're going to have an optional keyboard and mouse, but you can't actually design a game for optional equipment. That'd be like us designing the game for a rudder pedal or, a steering wheel or something like that. It would be suicide.
Right.
So the game would have to be just dramatically different. But as far as actually making it, as far as the compatibility nightmares, well, they just go away. Because the long-standing joke about, inside development is a programmer will turn to a director and say, well, dude, there's not a problem because it runs on my machine.
Right.
And it's kind of a joke because we know how many computers there are out there in the world. But on an Xbox or on a PS2 or on a, not Dreamcast anymore, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
On any kind of console, everybody has exactly the same machine. So if it runs on one machine, it runs on all of them.
And that would
pretty
be
attractive.
Yeah. So you can test it, and you can do all the error testing on the exact same machine in house that your customer is going to be using when you ship it, and that's a big advantage.
And all these unhandled exceptions and the frame rate issues and the not being happy about the peripheral that your favorite peripheral, like a 5-button mouse or the Mad Catz Jaguar XL or any of those peripherals, you don't worry about it. There's a few things, like you want to, like back in the days of working with the PlayStation, you wanted to be able to work with a rumble pack, or you wanted to be able to work with a couple of different controllers. But compared to the PC, it was nothing. It was a joke. It was like 5 things that you had to test with instead of 75,000 different configurations. Unfortunately, PC games rock.
Yeah.
They're a lot of fun to make. They're incredibly deep gameplay. They're probably some of the best gaming experience you can have. But man, are they hard to work with. They're just really hard to work with.
Now, overall, the initial release and the initial rollout, and we'll try and get into some of the sort of rumor squashing. Are you? I know from some of the conversations we had, you were happy with the number of units that were initially getting shipped to the stores. How do you gauge the initial release? Is it in Dynamics and Sierra's assessment? Has it been a successful initial release? Are you guys happy with it? Are you unhappy with it? Just give us a little sort of background on the business end, how you guys feel things have gone up to this point.
The initial release was phenomenal. The selling of the game and how many early adopters we had, the pre-sales, all that stuff was phenomenal. Because we had so many problems with the different configurations and being surprised by that stuff, I think that we got a little bit of a bad name after launch. Something that we were working so hard to avoid that. Thought we had everything nailed, and then of course we got just blindsided by it. And so because of that, sales have dipped right now. So we're going to be putting out the demo soon. We're going to be working on that hard very quickly. And when the demo comes out, what we're hoping is that people will try it out on their system, and if it works, then they won't be so timid about buying it, and we'll be back into it. We're still selling well right now, but the numbers have definitely dipped because of the, I guess justifiable flame wars that were happening on people's forums.
Now, one of the things, so now you admitted that a game that is just sort of reality of game publishing now, that games will ship with bugs. So in that respect, and there have been, numerous patches that have come out. How do you go about prioritizing what to patch when? Because one of the issues that's come up is when we get sort of this is the stuff that's been patched, and when people see things like, the bot on training level 2 or whatever, to some people that might be an issue, to other people it might not. So on the developer's end, how do you decide what to patch when?
Well, that's a tricky conversation. Well, obviously, we put I don't know whether people realized it or not, but we put a hell of a lot of effort into those unhandled exceptions. We had no idea why they were happening, and we hadn't seen them before. And in fact, we couldn't duplicate the unhandled exception on any of the 150 machines that we had available to us. But we were able to finally figure it out by working with customers and working on that. So obviously, people were crashing, and we had to figure out why.
Right.
Once we got a fix, we were able to move on again. So, something like that is just obvious. You fix the things that are preventing people from playing. Frame rate discussions are more interesting because a lot of the times, when we set up a machine that imitates somebody's computer that's out there in the world, we don't have that kind of bad frame rate in-house. But we're very intimate on how to set up drivers, et cetera, et cetera. Now, some people out there are really good at that. And some people have kind of some screwy ideas about what should work and what shouldn't. Some people are working with beta drivers. Some people have just got, quite honestly, they've got screwed up systems. And so when we emulate what they tell us they have, we can't necessarily fix it because when we do it in-house, it works just fine. As far as other bugs go, well, early on, I was trying to make sure that the single-player bugs were taken care of, simply because that's people's first impression into the game. If they weren't a Tribes 1 player, that's their first initial impressions, and I wanted people to be able to learn how to play the game and then be able to get in.
Right.
Other stuff is basically a subjective decision. I and the rest of the team are deciding which bugs are affecting gameplay the most. And that is a designer decision where we're looking at the different bugs and we're saying, that one's important because it's an abuse of the system. That one's important because it refines that area and makes it more intuitive. Or that one's important because that feature that was supposed to work is just flat broken. And there's not many of the flat broken ones, but for instance, like this buddy filter, the buddy filter.
Right.
That was really aggravating to me that it took this long, and I quite honestly, I apologize to our users for why the buddy filter wasn't working. But it is fixed now, and it will be available in the next patch. While I'm on that subject, I would suggest to people that when they're playing the game and they want to play with their friends, have everybody meet in a chat room. And then when one person joins the game, you can follow them in with the follow me links.
Yeah, that's what typically we've been doing internally with the TSN staff, is we'll just arbitrarily grab an IRC chat room inside. We'll just say, we'll go into the game and say, okay, meet in this chat room inside. And for those of you that were familiar with Tribes 1 and the script Tribes IP, we use it like that. We'll pop into one of the IRC channels in-game, and then one person will go to the game, which will leave a link, and we'll just all click on that link and follow them into the game. So that's sort of the workaround we've got with that. We talked a little bit, Dave, about, and if you're just joining us, we have Dave Georgeson, Kix from Dynamics, senior head honcho guru dude of Tribes 2, answering our questions. If you do have questions, we have a question bot in the IRC channel, TSN, on ircdynamics.com, port 6667. Private message the question bot with ! Add question, put your question after that, and then we'll be relaying them on the air. Now, and on the issue of the frame rate, because that's one of the more common ones, one of the more common questions. So I want to ask you a couple questions. Not something's open, are you looking at frame rate, but what would you consider, I think some of the things that people tend to overlook is that there are typically there's 32, if not more, people on a server. So it's not like a Quake game where you have 10 people or whatnot. When you say that with sort of a standard system in the office, you don't have those frame rate issues, what do you consider a good frame rate? What should people be happy with? Because I think that's one of the problems, is people are sort of comparing notes with other people, and they don't really know, they see themselves getting 30 or 40. In their mind, they don't think that's good. But what would you think would be a good sort of achievable frame rate that they should be getting?
I think that's the part where we get bit the hardest, is we're doing stuff, well, quite honestly, that nobody's ever done before. A 64-player game is, for instance, we get this all the time. Tribes 2 doesn't run as well as Counter-Strike. I get 100 frames per second in Counter-Strike, and I'm only getting 15 in Tribes 2. And I think about that for a while, and I'm like, okay, well, what kind of games are you playing? And when I talk to them, what I'm finding out is that they're running in 40 or 45-player games, and they're running in environments which are just gigantic, like say, I don't know, Reversion or something like that, where they're out there and they're fighting in these gigantic battles, or inside on a siege game, and they've got 20 people on the screen in the middle of Ultimate Fool, or yada yada yada. And I'm like, well, okay, think about it a little bit. If you play Tribes 1, your frame rate's probably pretty good, right? And they say yes. And I go, well, that engine is 2 years old, or almost 2.5 years old now, actually. And there's a hell of a lot less polys, and there's a lot less textures on the screen, and there's a lot less players. Most games in Tribes 1 were in the 16-player range.
Yeah.
And if you're playing Counter-Strike, you're probably playing with 8 players, or 8 players on the side, so 16-player game. And if you're playing on some of the other games, you're probably not playing above 16 players. Well, there's a lot of weight that goes with more players. When you push yourself up into somewhere between 32 and 64 player games, that's a lot of polygons. That's 1,500 to 2,000 polys per person, along with all the resulting explosions and projectiles and physics and all the different these gigantic terrains come with a cost. So if your system isn't a great system, you should consider playing on 32 players or less. We always said that during development, that 64-player games were going to be something that were for higher-end systems. In fact, we told people over and over again, and I know that's easy to forget because 64-player games rock. I Actually, I prefer 32 players, but I digress.
Right.
If you're running with a P2-400 and you're running into a 64-player game, well, my P2-400 at work, when we were doing those mass tests during NADA, was only getting between 5 and 10 frames per second. And I'm sorry, but that's reasonable. That's way too many people for a slow machine.
Yeah.
And but people don't get that. They buy a game, they pay $50 for it. It's a 64-player maximum, and they're like, well, that's what I should be able to do. And because they get 60 to 100 frames per second in Quake 3, they expect that's going to be the case in our game.
Now, okay, well, let's do this, David.
I just want to go one step further.
Sure. Go ahead.
If you want to see a competitive frame rate and you want to compare us against Quake 3, then do an apples-to-apples kind of comparison. Play a 16-player game inside. Check out our frame rate. It's good. It's really good.
Yeah.
But go outside and have a half mile of visible range and have 32 players doing explosions and stuff all over the place. Your frame rate's going to go down. It's just a reality.
I think that's one of the things that people seem to point out. Well, inside my frame rate's great, and then they compare it. Well, my frame rate's not the same it is in Quake 3. Well, yeah, it sort of is because most of Quake 3 is inside. But let me ask you this. From what I've seen, sort of the typical sort of standard, the way the servers seem to be sort of hashing out is about a 32-player game. So let's talk about what would you think, and internally your tests and what stuff, for a 32-player game, so with a mix of indoor and outdoor action, so like a full good game. What do you think kind of system people should have, and not the minimum specs, like not the minimum specs to play it, but like a good solid gaming experience for a 32-player game? What sort of system should they be looking at to really expect to be able to enjoy that gaming experience?
I think the suggested specs that are on the box are actually pretty good for that. If I was going to build a system at home and I was going to expect to have frame rates that didn't dip too much, and I was going to have a lot of fun. I'm a firm believer in RAM. I don't have a machine that has less than 256 megs of RAM because I've played so many games, and RAM just makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I'd have a CPU of around 600 or better, and I'd get a decent video card. And by decent, I mean like spend $50 and get at least a GeForce MX. If you're like, what, $53 right now or something like that?
Yeah, they're
I would get a card that handles polygons really well. And that's really the problem with the Voodoos. It's not that they can't handle textures, they can, and if you've got a Voodoo 5, it can actually handle quite a bit of textures. But a lot of the Voodoo has a real limitation with polygon transformations. And because of that, it kind of chokes when there's a lot of polygons on the screen.
And let's
Now, we're working on that, and in fact, we're doing benchmark, we took journals today. We're doing benchmarking over the weekend, and we're going to be looking at the Voodoo performance next week. And hopefully we're going to come up with some miracles and be able to help it. But the real trick is those drivers need a revision. They just need a revision. And if the Wicked GL guys come through for us, that'll be phenomenal. But that's a completely voluntary thing on their part. They're supporting a card that is no longer being manufactured. And if they do that, phenomenal. If they don't do that, there's not a lot we can do.
And that's a good segue into two things on the Voodoo end. I think as a developer, I think you're in an interesting position compared to some other developers in that your first game was really popular with the Glide crowd simply because of timing and whatnot. So you've got sort of this built-in audience and your second title is OpenGL, so the card doesn't necessarily transfer over. Now, to what extent, well, number one, you mentioned the Wicked GL. So are you guys, you mentioned that Wicked GL is volunteer. Are you guys working with them? Are you trying to help them out? Is there communication between Dynamics and the Wicked GL guys? Or is it just, it's their thing that they're doing? Like, what's the level of communication between the two parties?
We know that they have builds. We haven't actually communicated with them much. Part of that is, well, I guess that's my fault that I haven't talked to them. I need to talk to them. I developed a slight sense of complacency on my part because they said they were looking at Tribes 2 and they were trying to address some specific Tribes 2 oriented improvements in their drivers. And I was like, awesome, I've got other things to deal with. And so what we were doing was looking at our code and figure out if there was things we can do to improve the voodoo situation. And so because of that, I've let the relationship between us and Wicked 3D slip a little bit, and I really shouldn't. I'll give them a call on Monday.
And that's good news. And the other issue I wanted to bring about voodoo cards is realistically, and I mean, yes, it's a game, and yes, Tribes 2 and Tribes is founded on the community. I mean, that's one of the big things about it. But there's a certain extent where it is a business decision, and you mentioned that Voodoos are no longer being manufactured. New drivers aren't coming out. So how much time can you realistically devote to it, and how high a priority is it for you guys?
It's a big priority to us right now because, quite honestly, the Voodoo 2 and the Voodoo 3 sold really well last year, mostly because they were cheap, but they sold really well. So there's a hell of a lot of users out there with those cards. We don't want to piss people off. We want them to have a great gaming experience. Like I said, the frustrating part is that a lot of them are coming to our forums and saying, I don't know what you guys' problem is. My gaming experience is yada, yada, yada. I'm really happy with it, so on and so forth. But then somebody else comes back and says, I'm getting 5 frames per second. You completely suck. And what we have to do is try to troubleshoot why. Because we wouldn't have released the game if we were getting 5 frames per second. In fact, the last 2 to 3 weeks, you probably remember, you were in the beta.
Yeah. We
were constantly trying to find ways to improve the Voodoo experience, and by the time we released, we were really happy with it. We were playing on a Voodoo 2 on a 400 megahertz machine at Pentium with 128 megs of RAM and getting 25 to 30 frames outside. We wouldn't have released it otherwise.
Right.
So, yeah, it's been a very frustrating ride.
Now, in terms of general, and not sort of specific to Voodoo or Wicked Jail, in terms of frame rate optimizations, because one of the things, the sort of general questions, are they working to improve frame rate? And this is a two-tiered question. First one, and I'll throw this one out first. If people, and you say that, depending on their configuration, it could be the people's systems. So if I am in the situation, let's say I've got a system and I'm not getting the sort of performance that I feel I get, or I am getting those 5 to 10 frame rates per second, if I've purchased the game, what do I do? Do I call tech support? What would you recommend the person do that's experiencing serious performance issues with the game?
Well, I would say normally, like when I'm a user, when I'm a player and I'm out there in the community and I buy in and the performance isn't great or there's a problem with it or anything like that, I usually hit the forums.
Okay.
But quite honestly, the forums require a certain level of education to weed the wheat from the chaff. There's so much misinformation on the forums about what is a good fix and what isn't. Like copying drivers and renaming them and changing some BIOS configuration or whatever it is. And quite honestly, some of those fixes are just flat dangerous. Calling tech support is always a good idea. Tech support, whenever we find an issue, a solution, we let tech support up at Sierra know what that solution is. So if you call up there, they're going to give you some of the recommendations that we've found. But on the other hand, they always have to start from scratch on every single configuration. It can sometimes take quite a while to figure out what the machine problems are. Like, for instance, like the AGP aperture thing.
Yes.
That people were discussing in Meta. That's not something I can expect a casual user to know, or even to understand. Like going four menus deep in your advanced options on an NVIDIA card is a ridiculous thing for people to know how to do. So what we try to do is we try to create facts, and we try to create documents, and we'll continue to flesh out the troubleshooting section on the Sierra forums, so that when if you go into the news page and go to troubleshooting, hopefully as we find solutions, we'll put them up there. But we're just starting to do that right now. We're just starting to keep our head above water on some of these unexpected issues. And so you'll be getting more of that information from us soon, but for right now, there's not a lot of it.
Now, one of the other things I wanted to ask you was in terms of some of the features that two things. Number one is I wanted to ask about some of the things that were included since release. One of the ones that people really sort of jumped on was the CD check. Now, right. Which, for varying reasons, and I got to admit, I personally don't see the big deal in it, but other people do for whatever reason. So this was something, my understanding is, it was implemented because of retailer pressure.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit, like, why do you guys have to do that? Like, why is it good for you guys, or why is it important for you guys? Maybe if people understand it better, they'll understand better why you put it in.
Well, this is definitely a no-win discussion.
Yeah.
I'll say this: when we were originally making the game, Mark Fernmeyer and I sat down and we discussed copy protection, and in our opinion, we didn't need any copy protection except for the authentication server. And so when we were making the game, there was no copy protection on the single player, and there was no copy protection on the LAN, and there was no need to have a disk in the drive.
Okay.
And as we got farther and farther along, and we started talking to retailers and distributors and different marketplaces like Europe and so on and so forth, a lot of those people just flat refused to accept the game unless there was copy protection. And we went through, I've been through this conversation so many times with distributors and retailers, and especially the European marketplace. I don't believe in copy protection. I think it's bunk. There's no copy protection that I can put on a disk that's going to keep somebody from hacking it for more than like a day and a half. Everybody knows, so I'm not making news here, but there's a SecuROM hack out there for our game. Duh. If we put copy protection on the disk, it's not fooling anybody. But what it really boils down to, the retailers will not take the game. They won't take any game unless it has copy protection, because copy protection still prevents a lot of the casual users from copying the game and then returning it to the store. There's a hell of a lot of people that will go out there and buy the game and use the SecuROM hack, or they'll burn the CD and they'll take the trouble to actually pirate it and then take it back. But it's honestly, it's a small percentage of the total audience. It's in the realm of 5 to 10%. The other 80% of the people or 90% of the people don't do it. They buy it and keep it if it's going to be a hassle. And so the retailers insist on copy protection, and there's not much I can do about it.
Which segues into one of the other rumors I wanted you to quickly address is people are talking that the rumor seems to be that a lot of copies of Tribes 2 are getting returned. Is that true? Is that false? Is it typical? What's your information bit on that?
I'm not allowed to actually say our return numbers, but it's one of those things that concerned me because I knew there were issues. And so I checked into the return numbers, and currently they're extremely low, like less than 1%.
Oh, okay. That's fair. That's a rumor squashed. Now, in terms of we talked a little bit about patching and issues, and obviously there's issues that come up, and those are the first priority to get fixed, right? Any sort of game-stopping issues. Now, and let's say, so eventually those get whittled down, and things generally improve, and obviously you try, I'm saying obviously, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, you look for ways to optimize performance and anything that comes up. But after that's happened, now, gameplay is some of the stuff that, that does come up. And putting you a little bit on the hot seat here, the odds, and you and I have talked about Ultima Online 2 before, and the fact that the project got axed. The odds are pretty good that, without making you saying anything, it might jeopardize, that it wasn't exactly Dynamics' call when to release the game. More than likely, that would have come from a higher authority. So there might have been some things that you had to do or, didn't have a chance to do by the time the game got out. In terms of things like gameplay and balance issues, etc., are those the sort of things that are on the slate for things to be examined? Are you happy with the way the gameplay is now? Are you happy with the way the balance is? Are there some tweaks you would like to make?
We're going to be making tweaks and improvements and refinements on this game for as long as we continue to sell it, or as long as it's popular. Let me back up a second. When we were making Tribes 2, we had absolutely no intention of this being a fire-and-forget game. Most retail games are make it, box it, sell it, walk away, do some other game. Our intention has always had, our plan has always been a 2-year plan on this game. We were going to make this game, and we still are going to continue to refine it and improve it, make better games, make better aspects, improve the community, keep moving and moving and moving, so that there's no reason to buy any other game. people that pay $50 for this game should be happy for a very long time. I mean, it's just always been our vision. We want this game to be the best game of its type, in other words, a team game niche. We want this game to be the best team game in existence, and we don't want anybody else to be able to compete with us. So we intend on making regular improvements over time. There's a stigma with patches as if patches are a bad thing. And sometimes we're fixing bugs, but we're also improving gameplay, and you're going to see more and more and more of that as we go along. Was the balance good when we released it? Yeah, I think the balance is really good. I think there's a lot of stuff that's just phenomenal about this game, and the depth of gameplay and the different ways you play it, and the more you play it, you find out, okay, there's this play I can do, but there's this other counter play that counters that, and then there's this other thing that can counter the counter. And I think there's a hell of a lot of that. I think that as game balance goes, it's one of the better balanced games I've played in quite some time, and I know that sounds like I'm stroking my ego, but I'm serious about it. It's good gameplay. Is there ways to improve it? Yeah, there are, and we know that there's features and stuff that we want to add. There's certainly community things that we're going to add. I've been very open about the idea of putting in like player rankings and tournaments and leagues and ladders, and all of that stuff will be coming out over time. We already have plans on creating an add-on, and I've been working on designs for that. The difference between what I call a rollout feature and an add-on is that rollout features have to be really small in terms of patch, whereas the add-on can deliver a whole bunch of new art and missions and so on and so forth to take a huge amount of bandwidth to be able to download. So there's a distinction between those, but even the rollouts can be significant improvements in the game. In fact, there's a missile improvement soon, which I think people will really like because it makes the missile launcher much more intuitive. And we're doing stuff like that all the time, and we will be making more and more and more of it as the flames slowly die out on the forums.
Now, and I think, the one thing that people have a tendency to overlook, and I see this coming up in IRC, is the tribes community is very vocal, and it's sort of learned to be that over time, and part of that, I guess, is being spoiled by their own success. You've been very active in participating on the forums. People feel that they have input into the game, and as a result, it might, and arguably it might be a minority, but it's a very vocal group that is that's voicing their opinions. And some of the opinions are that the game is what people call "quote unquote" too defensive. How would you address that question? Do you think that's something that people just possibly haven't learned? It's maybe a learning curve issue. They haven't learned the different ways to do the offense. Should they be expected to learn it? Should offense not be intuitive? In general, to the question of the game is too defensive, how would you address that issue?
Well, I do think that the game is defensive when people haven't taken the time to explore the options. Certainly the easiest thing to do in our game is defend. It's quicker to deploy a turret perimeter. It's easier to set up sensors. It's certainly easy to camp on the top of a roof and use missile launchers against incoming vehicles. There's a lot of things that are set up so that it is easy for defense to happen.
Okay.
On the other hand, there's a lot of really powerful offensive tools, and I'm not really certain. Well, let's put it this way. Obviously, the dev team knows how to play.
Right.
We've played the game a lot. And pretty much any time that we want to pick 6 or 7 guys and go into a pub, we can cap on any mission, any time. Part of it is because we know the maps. Part of it is because we know how to play. Part of it's also because some of us are willing to play dedicated defense no matter what. I was in a map the other day I can't remember whether it was last night or the night before last. We were playing Capture the Flag on Reconnaissance, which everybody says is an impossible mission to cap on. So we capped out. So it was like 6-0 on Reconnaissance. So obviously it's not impossible to cap there. It's just that most people don't take the time to learn the bases or haven't had the time to learn the bases. There's a lot of layouts. There's a lot of buildings. There's certainly a hell of a lot of options in the game. For some reason, everybody thinks that that the only game to play in this game is CTF. And if they can't play CTF just the way they played it in Tribes 1, they're upset. I understand that. Familiar is familiar. It's easier. You want to play the same game that you played. But, I mean, hell, Tribes 1 still exists. There's no reason to not play that if that's what you're comfortable with. But if you want a new game that's got a hell of a lot of depth, I think Tribes 2 rocks. I think the gameplay is excellent.
You know what? And
there are definitely maps that could use some tuning. What was the map we were just talking about the other day that has too many force fields? Oh, on Siege, Alcatraz is you can rush it too easily. So we may be changing that map a little bit in the future. And we'll continue to do that as we watch how people are playing the game.
Now, you made a really interesting point there that I want to interject on, that people keep talking about, and I've been pointing out as well. A lot of the suggestions seem to be trying to make T2 more like T1, and the point that you just made there is T1 still exists. There's nothing to stop people from playing it. Dynamics made T1, so if you want T1 game, and I think people hear this as a harsh reaction, but I really don't think it is. Maybe we can talk about this for a second. When you said T1 still exists and people can play it, I think that's very valid. If you like that sort of gameplay, that game still exists. T2 is a different game. So what do you think about people that say, in general, well, it should be more like T1, when the fact that T1 is not completely removed, T1 is still an option?
Well, I think that T2 is remarkably like T1, but there are definitely significant differences. But like when I played Quake 1, I was all ticked off because it wasn't Doom 2. And I didn't like Quake 1. But then when Quake 2 came out, I thought that it had a lot of stuff together, and some of the mods were really fun, and I played the hell out of Quake 2. When Quake 3 came out, I didn't care about it. It wasn't Quake 2. It's all flavors. It's all in what you want to play. And not every game is going to satisfy every individual. But I think that if you want to play team gaming, Tribes 2 rocks. If you want to play as part of a team, if you want to get together with other people and be able to do stuff, it's phenomenal. And I apologize for the buddy list not being up, but now that it will be up as of like Wednesday next week, I think that people will be able to find their friends more often. They'll be able to coordinate teams in the games a lot more. We have some features that are coming up, including, well, I won't get into the details of what a launch room is, but we're setting up a lot of things that will enable people to be part of a team, to be on servers where teams want to play more often, so to get rid of some of the pub atmosphere. Pubs are great, but there's other people that want to be serious about their team gaming, and we want to facilitate that. So if you want to be, Cowboy Capper, HO, then Tribes 1 is your game. If you want to be a team game where you're participating in fulfilling a niche or being a commander or being a great pilot or being whatever, well, then Tribes 2 is your game. And it really doesn't matter which one you play. I think that Tribes 2 is phenomenal. And we design games, we the Dead Team of Dynamics, our motto has always been, we design games that we want to play. So we make the game, and then we hope people want to play it. And if they don't want to play it, we listen to their attitudes. We listen to the discussion. I read so many posts. You know how big of a forum whore I am.
Yes.
I read all the posts. I listen to them, even when they're flames, because even somebody that's flaming, if you dig deep down, there's usually a kernel of something that's really valid there. And I write all that stuff down, and we talk about it constantly. So a lot of the improvements that you're going to be seeing in the future are based upon the feedback we're getting from the forums. I'm probably diverging way off topic.
No.
I think you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I do understand what you're saying, and I want to get into some specific sort of gameplay type issues that are some of the questions. Specific, and some of the more common ones that I've seen. I've got my own opinions on the answers, but this is your forum and your opportunity to address these, so I want you to answer them. People saying that skiing's been toned down in their opinions too much, or why did you change skiing so much? How do you respond to that question?
It quite honestly a design decision. It wasn't that heavy offense was a bad thing. It wasn't. It's just not the game we wanted to design. When we were putting in vehicles, there's this whole give and take about what's good and what's not good. If you're going to spend a lot of time creating vehicles and making them fun, and I think that everybody will agree that our vehicles are quite fun in Tribes 2, you don't invalidate them by making them useless. And if everybody can ski, it can ski at Mach 5 across the map, then there's no reason to have vehicles. And the design decision was that vehicles promote teamwork. And most of the time they do. Even in pubs, you'll see people, popping up a bomber or popping up a tank or popping up a Havoc and going across the map together. And because they do that, they start to realize what teamwork is. Now, sure, sometimes you get those screwy situations where you get a pilot, a bombardier, and a tail gunner and a bomber. You go over the base, and all of a sudden the pilot bails out. Well, don't get in a plane with him anymore. But when teams get together, that team play is phenomenal. And there's a lot of stuff that we did intentionally to promote teamwork and to get people to work in groups. And heavy offense was fun, but it wasn't group-oriented unless you were a top OGL team that spent a lot of time doing tactics together. And there weren't very many of them proportionally to the rest of the large number of players that played Tribes 1. What we want to do is make a better gaming experience for more people, and so that's what we're working on.
So one of the things that I do have to say is a lot of these questions that I'm firing at you are directly from the IRC. I'm not, and Boris just pointed out what I should be saying is who asked the question, so I'll try to do that more, but for those of you wondering why I'm not taking the IRC questions, a lot of these questions are IRC questions. For example, Rosdower on that subject. So with what you just said about skiing, are you looking at making any modifications to skiing, gravity, or speed? Or are you happy with the speed of the players and the individual armors the way they currently are?
So far, I'm pretty happy with it. There's been a long-standing nag in the back of my head about maybe the medium not having enough juice. Not that it skis, the skiing speed is pretty good, but sometimes I get a little frustrated at what seems like a lack of oomph as far as the jump jet goes. And that could be either thrusting mass or amount of energy or a couple of other things. But in general, I like the light speed. I play Rabbit a lot. I play Hunters a lot and Bounty. And in those things, I use lights a lot. When I'm playing team games, I use mediums. Well, I use mediums than probably anybody else that I know. And I have a really good time with them. If I need to cross distance, I grab an E-pack. If I'm doing anything else, I grab other packs. Heavies, I either get in a vehicle or I'm on defense, one or the other, and that's really the way heavies are designed.
So what would you suggest then for the guy that, and now let's go in this direction. So if in Tribes 1 I was a heavy-o base wrecker, that role is really kind of gone in Tribes 2. So what would you suggest? Okay, if that's what you want to do, and you want to do some base wrecking, instead of getting in your heavy armor and skiing across the map, what are some of the alternatives? And you mentioned the dev team sort of knows how to play the game. So let's get some dev team insight. How do you address that? How would you do that situation? So that's what you want to do. You want to bust up the base. How would you recommend doing it?
Well, we do it a lot via the vehicles. We'll take heavies over. That's not a problem to us. There's a couple of ways we can do it. On a flat map, like a reversion or something like that, we'll usually take an MPD over so that you can speed up at a distance. If you take it and you put it far enough away from the base, but closer, a hell of a lot closer than, from your own base, and you beacon it, you can actually launch a lot of attacks from it before the enemy kind of twigs to the fact that it's out there. But that's kind of right now that's a moderate tactic. Most of the time what we do is we take air vehicles across, if there's air vehicles available. The larger maps almost always have air vehicles available. And we facilitate that by using the microphones. We talk a lot. The dev team talks a lot over the microphones. We hit X, we talk over the microphone, we're like, hey guys, we're gonna put together a transport, need the vehicle map. Or we use the command structures and we say like, meet me at from the command map, or we say, a lot of times, we've worked out tactics like, somebody that typically pilots, when he spawns back at the map, he'll give a VVH to say help, and then everybody can accept the command and see where he is, and then they come back to the vehicle map and load up a heavier, load up a transporter, load up a bomber, or whatever it is, and head across the map. There's lots of little shortcuts that you can do like that will enable other people to find you. I think that right now when I go onto pubs, half the time I see people communicating well, and in those cases, the maps usually run pretty well. And half the time, I see nobody talking at all. And in those cases, it's more like a traditional T1 pub, where nobody's working together and there's not much team effort. But it's easy to understand which one's a lot more fun. So I think that once people get once people start adopting the communication and they start listening to each other, all of a sudden they're going to realize that it's not hard to pull off offense in this game. It really isn't. You just have to talk. You have to want to play the game with other people. The people that play team games like individuals are never going to be happy. And in my opinion, they should play some of the other fun games that we have that are individually based. Hunters, Rabbit, Bounty, even Deathmatch if they want to play it.
Now, and what about, and this is a personal question, one of the things in terms of doing that sort of stuff that helps a lot is, that I've noticed, is you get in your command screen or whatever, and you waypoint a teammate. So you know where they are, they know where you are, so you can get your little team going. But currently in game, you can only do that with one person at a time. Are there any plans to expand that so you could, for example, if you had your bomber crew, then you could have every member of your bomber crew waypointed, or if you had your offensive attack force, that you could have more than one person waypointed at a time? Any sort of changes like that are in the plans to make it easier to do that sort of grouping and that sort of coordination that the game would seem to require?
There is one thing that we've been talking about doing, and it'll probably find its way into the game, which is you've probably played real-time strategy games. Yeah. Like Command & Conquer, StarCraft, something like that. And you know how you can do from the top down, you can either lasso a group or you can click select them and then be able to say Control 2 or Control 3 and have them have groups. Yes. We've been talking about putting that functionality in so that you could then, Bob, Ted, and Fred, your group 2, Mary, Bob, and anyway, you get the idea. So you can be able to say Control 2 and be able to see where that group is, or be able to do things like when you jump into a vehicle, your microphone communication opens up to everybody in the vehicle, so that you can immediately talk amongst the bomber crew.
I think, just personally, I think something like that would be very handy, because my feel from playing a lot of the pubs and whatnot, and generally sort of the random kind of game experience is to do, and I think this is why some people are getting frustrated, is because at this stage, and we'll get into the organized part in the next section, and some specific questions I have for you about that, but in the pub thing, the offense, and as you said, the offense does require coordination. Now, the in-game voice chat if you've ever listened to this show, people calling in through buddy phone or whatnot, voice chat through your computer is not exactly the easiest thing to hook up. So, sometimes relying on that is a bit of a challenge. And I think that anything you can do, whether it's in terms of making a group within the game that you can communicate with better, and any sort of thing that can enhance that experience, in order to get that kind of coordination, I think will help, because when people are pubbing, and just some advice for the folks listening, if you do try and pub with a group of friends, and as Dave mentioned, the buddy list thing coming out next Wednesday will help a lot to play with the people you know, but that really does make things a hell of a lot easier. But it sounds, Dave, like you guys are on the right track if you're looking at stuff like that, because I think that's less of a gameplay issue, and that's more of a facilitation issue, which should offset the gameplay balance stuff that people are talking about, in theory at least.
I think that if we had a flaw when we launched as far as gameplay went, it was that we didn't make communication easy enough. The command map is extremely powerful, but it's hard to learn, and it's pretty deep. It's not what you call a casual user thing. Most people want to go in, shoot things up, and have a great time. And you can do that for a while in this game. But to truly be a team player, you have to learn the other features that are available. Now, hopefully, if we did our job right, people are going to have enough fun with Tribes 2 at the beginning that they're going to stick with it for a while and learn the other features. And when they do, they won't want to play anything else, because nothing else has the kind of depth that we have here. And quite honestly, I don't see anything that is going to have the kind of depth that we have here. Yeah, okay, I'm cocky about my own game. But we will continue to refine that stuff. You can do a lot of communication right now. There's a lot of features. Learn the voice bind menu. The guys who are in T1, that's easy. But there's a lot of people out there that haven't taken the time to learn the voice bind menu. Try to set up your microphone. If you've got a microphone, take the time to make it to work with it until it does work. When you go into a game with a friend, do some microphone tests and see if they can hear each other. Turn down your sound effects. If you turn down your sound effects and crank up your microphone values and your voice line values, all of a sudden you'll find out that it's a whole lot easier to hear everybody else. And that will make it easier for you to use the microphone. And if you do a little bit of work like that, also you'll find out that it's a lot easier to communicate than you thought it was. And when you can communicate, those games, it rocks. It's just a lot of fun. I play it every night. I come home and play the game.
I mean, not to be too difficult on it, but I realize that the communication is definitely a key. But that's not always not. I mean, there's a lot of people out there without microphones, for example, that want to play the game.
Sure.
There's a lot of different ways to do it. There's a lot of people that simply because of ping issues or whatnot, they might turn off the in-game voice stuff. Alternatives to that, I think, and this isn't so much a question as just some feedback, is I think ways outside of that might be welcomed and ways to differently outside of using the in-game voice stuff.
Sure.
A couple questions that are coming up a lot through the IRC from a number of different people. Number one is there seems to be a flag bug that people are asking me if you're aware of, which is when the flag drops, the flag in Tribes 2 is different than it was in Tribes 1, and that's an actual object. The flag bug, as it's being described, seems to be that if it drops in the game, you will sort of physically see it like hop across the ground for a little bit, but then it'll jump back to the point where it first hit the ground. So
you know about that. It's really annoying. It doesn't step all the way back, but it does. It's like, for instance, if it's sliding down the hill, you see the rabbit a lot. You'll pull the rabbit, and the flag will slide down the hill, and then it'll almost come to rest, and then it'll hop back about 4 feet.
So that's
and that's really annoying, and we're going to fix it soon.
Okay, so that is the flag bug is a known issue, and it is something that's being addressed.
Yeah, that and that silly one where if you stay on the flag, it hovers above your head.
Yes.
I don't know why that happens, but we'll fix it soon.
That is the heavy under flag bug that I've been referred to as, because it's still grabbable then, by the way.
Sure, and if you move, it falls right to the ground.
Yeah. It's
actually a weird bug. It's a strange odd bug. Yeah.
Because I will tend to play heavy on flag a lot, and I will have that happening. And if you haven't seen this, it's pretty odd. If you're playing heavy on flag and you're actually standing on the flag stand, the flag will sort of rematerialize above your head. So it's like perched there like an apple in William Tell. And the capper can come by and actually grab the flag off the top of your head, which is very bizarre. It's a very bizarre thing. Anyway,
it's a very minor bug, but it looks weird, and we're going to fix it.
One of the things I think that was really popular in Tribes 1, and one of the things that made Tribal Wars such a popular site, and especially with all the new tactics and approaches and whatnot in Tribes 2, is demos. People really, especially with the OGL firing up and sort of competitive play starting. Fraggle mentioned when he called in earlier, as a way to check against cheats. If you have a complaint, the demos is one of the traditional ways in which you file a complaint. When will demos be enabled? What is the plan with demos?
Demos were, I don't know if you remember or not, but they were briefly operational before we went gold.
Yes.
And we took the feature out because the longer we experimented with it, the more we realized that there was a bunch of bugs in it. And so the intention was to be able to release it soon after we released. I think we're to the point now where we're going to be able to look into things like that and be able to work on it. We probably have about 15, maybe 16, 17 minor bugs with the demo stuff that we need to squish before we put it out, and then it'll just become available in a patch. A lot of the code that we need to have in is already in the game right now. It's just that there's quite a few areas or ways where you can confuse the demo so it doesn't play back properly, or even crash the demo, and so we need to fix those before we make it available.
So what are some of the other quick questions about tourney mode and observer mode? You and I know that in the beta we had that one demonstration in tourney mode and had some difficulties with it. What are some of the top? A couple different things. Tourney mode and observer mode. What are the plans with it in the next little while? and then I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll ask another question.
Well, you know, personally, what we're doing with Observer Mode.
Yes.
We're going to be putting out a whole suite of professional gaming that your wish list is still on my desk.
Oh, cool.
We have a first release, and then we have all kinds of other things that like were on your list of things that we could do. Those will be rolling out later, possibly as late as the add-on for some of it, but we'll definitely make it so that shoutcasters and broadcasters can utilize or the equivalent of radio, the games extremely well very soon. That's on the top list of priorities. What was the other thing you asked about?
Tournament mode.
Tournament mode is going to get, it's usable right now. It could be better. We have some ideas that are linked in with the launch room concept, which is also on the top of the new improvements to the game that we'd like to do. When we have the launch room all in shape, tournament mode will be able to use that same situation to be able to launch into games, and I think you'll find it to be a dramatic improvement. It's something that this concept is something that I haven't seen in other games, and I think that it's going to be phenomenal for improving the quality of team gaming. Now that's pretty much all I can say about that right now, but I would expect improvements in the next month or so.
So the next month or so, one of the things about tourney mode and a combination, I guess, of tourney mode, especially with competitive play firing up, is right now observers can't communicate with the people that are playing in the game. And with competitive play firing up, the problem is if someone drops from the server and reconnects, they have no way to communicate with their team to get reteamed. That's one of the reasons it's coming up as an issue now.
Right.
So that's...
Well, we could fix that. That's easy. I mean, we still may not allow universal chat from the observer camera. I'm not saying we won't, but we may not. What we may do is make it available to talk to the admins from the observer camera.
Okay. Now, what?
Because it's only the admins that can add them in anyway.
That's a good point. And that's just assuming you have admins on both sides, but that's fine. I mean, that's a way around it. What is the logic behind removing observers from talking with everyone in the server?
I'll be honest, I can't remember what the logic was right now.
Okay.
Fair enough. I just don't want to give you the wrong answer, and I don't remember what the logic was right now.
Oh, okay. What would you identify as, say, I don't know, the top 5 issues that you guys are working on right now?
Oh God, this is guaranteed to get me some flames on the forums.
Sure.
Let's see. All right. Well, most of the flames have died out, except for Voodoo owners being ticked off about frame rate. So that's one of the things we're going to be looking at extensively next week. We have some major rollout features that we want to do, like the rollouts and the professional gaming tools, and we have a bunch of stuff that will make the game easier to play and more fun for people because they'll be able to interconnect more easily through a whole variety of means. And those are the improvement side. And there's also just a ton of little niggly issues. As people play the game, they find ways to abuse it. They report in cheats. By the way, everybody's been really cool about telling us what the cheats and exploits are so that we can go ahead and fix them, and we do that on a periodic basis. Basically, whenever we find them, we try to fix them right away.
Right.
And those issues right there are the bulk of what we have to do. There's some other stuff that you guys aren't even aware of, like the fact that Korea is this gigantic gaming hub, and they would be extremely happy if we were able to what they call multi-byte enable the game, so that Korean characters and stuff like that could be displayed. For our particular game, because of the community and stuff like that, that's a gigantic job. But it would be really smart of us to do it business-wise, and we're looking into that right now, and we have no idea whether we're going to be able to do it. Additionally, there's the add-on down the road, and for us to be able to pull off a really stellar add-on so that the game just gets phenomenal special effects improvements and visuals, and there's new kinds of gameplay and stuff like that. We have to start designing that right now. So there's a lot of stuff going on at Dynamics. We're very busy people.
Right.
But does that answer your question?
I think so. Some of the issues. Well, okay, let's put it this way then. What are some of and you mentioned the voodoo frame issue, and that'll be good news to a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
but what are some of the...
I can't guarantee anything there.
Yeah, I understand, but at least you're addressing it, right? And that's...
Sure, yeah, we definitely are looking into it hard.
And you mentioned that you are, to use your words, a forum whore. So what are some of the main concerns from the community, from the people? So as opposed to say, we're rolling out in Korea, so putting in Korean characters. What's some of the hot items that you're seeing coming out of the community from the people that have already bought the game that are issues you guys feel you should be addressing or are addressing sooner and are sort of the higher priority issues?
Well, the buddy list was one of them, but we fixed that today. I can't remember this stuff off the top of my head. That's why I make lists. I have no short-term memory. Let's see. I don't know. Name some of them. I'll tell you if they're on the top of the list.
Well, the big ones. The flag bug is one. You talked about that. Is that something that we're going to see in like a pretty immediate patch? You mentioned you were aware of it. If you're aware of it, then I'm assuming that means it's in the process of getting fixed.
It honestly hasn't been one of the flames that are out there. It's not on the top of our list. We can move it up if it's a big hassle for competitive or something like that. Most of the games that we've seen it be an issue with are essentially like Rabbit.
Okay. The most common ones I'm seeing. The most common ones I'm seeing, and the most common ones I hear about, and for whatever it's worth, and take that, obviously it's not a reflection of the entire community, just, the position that we're in. The biggest one, the flag bug, the frames per second issue, just sort of in as a general universal one, is probably without a doubt the most common, whether you want to call it a whine or a bitch or a complaint or a concern, I guess, is the question. So that's one of them. One of the others is in terms of the play balance. There are people there's a certain portion of people that feel that the game is too defensive. Those are, and things like turrets, for example, turrets being too powerful, flags being too inside, it being just sort of too difficult to cap. Those are the main ones in general. And the FPS issue, why don't we deal with that separately? And then the other thing is more sort of overall gameplay, and that's not so much a specific bug issue, and we touched about it a little bit, and we'll get into a little bit more on what sort of game is this, just philosophically. But let's deal with the FPS issue first, because that's probably the most common thing. We talked about it a little bit, about what people can expect. How much more can you guys really do on the frame rate issue? Is there anything more you can do?
Well, quite honestly, I really hate to call it the FPS issue. I think that's a real misnomer, and it's so dramatically different from machine to machine. You can watch the forums, and some guy with a 600 and a Voodoo 3 will be, just absolutely bitching about the fact that he's getting 5 frames per second and stuff like that, and then somebody else will come in and say, dude, I got a P400 with a Voodoo 3, and my frame rate's 35, 40 frames per second. So there isn't any one single frame rate issue. Even with the exact same cards and with the exact same CPUs, we see radically different performance on different systems. So it's going to be very difficult. We can pull the benchmarking, and we can go through all this profiling and trying to figure out exactly where our bottlenecks are in the code. But improving those bottlenecks is not necessarily going to do much for these people that have these systems that are having issues. It may, but it's certainly not going to fix the issues for everybody. It can't. We're seeing too many wildly different frame rate performance benchmarks on very simple, but from different people.
Right.
You see the issue?
Yeah. So there's a certain point where, and Dave, because of dial pad, Dave was breaking up a little bit there. His answer was essentially, you'll have two people with the exact same specs getting wildly different results in terms of performance. And I guess I'm not the most technically minded guy in the world, but my reaction would be, well, that means if there's somebody getting really good performance, that would seem to remove the game code as the problem. So then it becomes more of a technical issue. And not to sound like Microsoft, but is there a certain point where you guys say, you know what, maybe it's user error, maybe it's hardware error?
Well, what we do is, and one of the reasons why I really like it when people call tech support, is because what tech support does is it compiles records of the calls. And so what we can do is we can sort of see when people call into tech support and they get these calls and everything like that is, like let's say tech support gets 150 calls in a day. Well, if 10 or 15 of those calls is all exactly the same issues from different people, we can start to recognize that as an issue. And what we can do is look at that and say, well, with this hardware, with our code, maybe we have a problem. But when tech support gets 150 calls in a day, and they're wildly different issues across the board, or worse yet, different performance on the same, what seem to be the same machines, those are really hard for us to chase down. Because essentially what we're doing is we're saying, well, we got a couple of million lines of code here, where do we start? Because if we don't get it, it's like a detective mystery. If you don't have a clue to start with, there's no way to find the solution. And so that's why we do things like, well, when we posted those 6 major issues on the forums, that earned us a lot of flames. I mean, we just got roasted by the community for posting what our bugs were. But it really helped us out a lot because what we did was we got like 85 people responding to those forums, and then I had one programmer assigned to each of those topics, and they went out and talked to those people and worked with them and ran journals, sent them code, so on and so forth, and there's probably people that can tell you that happened with them. And we were able to solve every single one of those issues. I believe. I should go back and review those issues, but I think we fixed all those issues.
Now, is that something you might look at doing again?
I don't know, man. We got such a gigantic PR black eye, and I think it really hurt our sales and everything like that. It's difficult for us to do that.
Oh, okay.
And that's one of the reasons why, huh?
No, I find that interesting, because I thought something like that was, I hadn't seen it before, and to be honest, I thought that was a cool thing to do.
I did too. I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, ass kissing aside, I thought it was like, hey, you know what? Like, these guys are being honest. Here are the issues. Let's find out what the problems are. So it's seriously, like, something like that comes back on you guys in a bad way. I find that very interesting.
Oh, geez. Well, you know me. I would much rather be honest and upfront and tell you. There's stuff that I've told you in this interview right now that I guarantee I'm going to get flamed about. I didn't even get calls from Sierra. But I would rather be honest about our issues and tell you exactly what we're doing and what we're trying to fix than to hide it. But the problem is, every time I do that, I get, oh man, the flame wars are intense. There are fan sites that we used to have great conversations and everything like that, but I don't even go back to them right now because the flames are so intense. Because what I did was I admitted that we have bugs. And what happened after that was now every time anybody gets a hiccup in their game, they blame the code.
Okay.
And it's our fault for having bugs in the code. And I freely admit that when you pay $50 for a game, you expect it to be perfect. I do the same thing. Every time I get a bug in a game that I buy, I'm annoyed. So I don't blame anybody. But the fact of the matter is, when we admitted some culpability, all of a sudden, man, the forums just lit on fire. We've had nothing but negative ever since then because everybody just assumes it's us, even when it's not us. We go through and we work with the customers and we find out what the solution is, and it's usually like an out-of-date driver, or there's a conflict with something that they were running in the background, or the fact that ICQ doesn't work well with our game, or just a lot of different things.
Now, and sort of in that same vein, one of the other, and you mentioned sort of what are some of the top issues that I've seen. One of the things that people mention is there seems to be an issue, and one of the phrases that gets kicked around for what it's worth is the phrase memory leak. To your knowledge, is there a memory leak in Tribes 2? What people will mention is after playing for a while, say an hour or two, that things will start chunking and they've got to get out of the game and reboot and come back in. People seem to indicate that is an indicator of a memory leak problem. Is there an issue with that? Is that something that is a known issue? Is that a RAM issue? Is that something that alleviates? Like, what's your response to that? issue?
I've been watching the forums in the last few days, and I've been seeing several people saying that they have a memory leak. And what we need to do is we need to contact those people, because what we did was we did have a memory leak issue. And in fact, I think that was one of the 6 major issues that we posted. And we talked to a lot of people, and we benchmarked stuff and everything like that. And we fixed, there was one fairly significant memory leak, and there was one really minor one. And we fixed both of those, and we thought that we currently think that we nailed the memory leaks. But if people are still experiencing memory leak-ish kind of results, then we need to look at it again. And that's not a problem. We can do that. We're not proud. We'll look at anything as long as. But the trick is we need to try to figure out what they're doing and what's happening when they're doing that. Like exactly how many maps do they cycle through? What game are they playing? Maybe that has an impact on it. Do they have bots or do they not have bots? Any kind of information we can get like that helps us. When people just say, like I play for 3 hours and then all of a sudden my performance gets sluggish, and that's the only report we get, well, we're back to the 2 million lines of code kind of thing.
Right. Some other quick sort of like one-off questions that are coming up fielding from IRC is, and these, now you mentioned let's talk about this because this might address some things. You mentioned the add-on pack. And people are saying, well, why talk about the add-on pack? Why not about the game we've already got? And I want to talk about this because I think the add-on pack, it's sort of an expansion of the game you've already got. So right. What is planned for the add-on pack? What is it?
I can't talk about that yet.
Oh, okay.
We're still making it up. If you're worried about us spending a lot of time on the add-on pack, quite honestly, it's just me and the designers that are working on the add-on pack. Everybody else is still working on Tribes 2, and is still working on refinements to the gameplay and fixing some of the issues that people are having, etc. The add-on pack is just something that every time we get close to being done, the way the game industry works is you spend 1.5 years on a game with 2 years. When it gets down to around alpha, there's a certain core element of the team that will always split off and start working on the next project. That's so that whenever the main team is done with the project, they have something to do instead of just sitting around on their thumbs and not doing anything, just wasting money. So this is just a fact of life kind of thing. It's the way the industry is designed to work, and that's the way we're doing it right now. So we are doing some thought about the add-on pack, but it's not a significant reality right now, and I couldn't even tell you when it's coming out.
And just some other sort of individual bugs and individual questions. One of the bugs that I have, and a lot of the bugs that people have mentioned, personally I haven't experienced myself, so I can't elaborate on them. I can just feel the questions. But one I have experienced that I can account for its frustration level is the missile lock sound getting stuck on you.
Yeah.
Is that an issue that you guys are aware of, that you're addressing or looking at or figured out?
I wasn't really aware of that until this last week. I started noticing complaints about it in the forums.
Where I started noticing
that was an old issue that we had during beta, and we got rid of it.
You know where I noticed where it came in? I don't know if this helps or not, but after the patch which changed the way that missiles react to flares, so one flare, one missile, it was after that
one
patch.
Flare, one missile?
Yeah. It was after that patch that I started having it, and I'd never had it before. So I don't know if that helps or not, but
we have some pretty significant missile improvements coming up, and I have a feeling that will get addressed very quickly. I know it's not addressed for next Wednesday's, but for the one after that, it probably will be. And I have yet to experience it, so it may be systems that might have to figure that out. It's happening to a bunch of people, so I'm not saying that it's any one system, but it may be a certain. I don't know why that would be. That sounds fishy to me, but I haven't seen it, and I've been in a lot of games, so I'll have to keep looking for it.
Now, I want to try and we've had you on the phone for a little bit here, so I want to start trying to work towards wrapping it up. We've got an awful lot of, and folks that have been asking questions in the IRC. I mean, it's a given with something like this. We aren't going to get to all of them. We're getting to as many as we can. Some of the, and again, I encourage you to very quickly fire them through an IRC if you've got some more. You don't have to worry about the question bot. Just fire them right in the TSN channel, and I'll quickly get to as many as I can. Some little stuff, some very, very quick stuff is formerly, IRC, there's the in-game IRC. There's been talk about having that open so you can access it from an external IRC client, like an MIRC program. What's the issue with that? Is that something that's in the plans?
Yes, it's in the plans. We'll be releasing a DLL that allows external IRC to connect to internal IRC.
Okay, so that's a yes. Some of the other, quick little sort of one-off stuff, are you aware of or not? People mentioning the mouse button sticking, specifically with respect to Jetpack.
We're going to be working on that on Monday.
Okay.
What it turns out is there's a. Well, I won't get into the details. We know exactly how to fix it. We're going to fix it on Monday.
Okay. That's a
concise
answer.
Build a patch after next.
When next patch? When do you anticipate it coming out?
The next patch will be Wednesday.
Next patch.
We've been doing them weekly for now. Eventually, we'll stop and we'll start making them like biweekly and then maybe even monthly. But right now, while they're still we're still encountering issues with people and like system specific stuff and everything like that. As soon as we get fixes made, we want to get them out quickly, so we're releasing weekly patches for now.
Now, one of the things I noticed that was in the game and then got patched out, and now people are saying that, and maybe it's sort of an overreaction to certain people, but there was the ability to Perma Ban that seems to have been removed. Is that correct? I don't run a server, so I don't know, but
it's only sort of true. The admin can still Perma Ban. The admin can still ban a player. Players can only kick players. They essentially vote to kick. The trick was vote to ban was getting overly abused. We don't mind people get kicked. That's not a permanent thing. But really, only admins should be able to ban people from their server.
Okay.
So we set that up to allow that.
Now so the admins can still ban people from a server. Now, what about the actual perma-banning? There's been some stuff, one of the things, I guess, with the community and the authentication, all that, is that there will be, the ability to perma-ban people. How will something like that work? Is that something that the server admins might have access to perma-ban someone's account from their particular servers? Is that strictly a dynamics issue from perma-banning someone from the game in general? What is sort of the ramifications of a perma-ban?
Well, I'll tell you, perma-banning is not something that I'm interested in promoting.
Okay.
However, everybody's server is their own kingdom. Everybody is the king of their own kingdom. And if you want to set up a perma-banning system, well, I have already seen scripts used for other purposes that could be easily modified to perma-ban. So I think that it's an inevitable thing. It probably will be very soon that perma-bans will be out there. I personally don't like the idea of server admins passing around what would be the equivalent of a blacklist. But there are certain people that deserve it. I'll admit that.
Right.
So I think that if people take it with some restraint, and they don't just pass around these lists and ban people just because somebody else banned them, everything will be fine. But if it turns into a witch hunt, it might be a real annoying thing, and we'll have to deal with that if that's what happens. Okay.
Some people are asking. You mentioned that this banning thing is still available for admins. We have some people asking that they haven't seen how to do it. Is there a quick answer to that?
Yeah, you can just do it through the lobby.
Right through the lobby, so the same way you could before?
Yeah.
Is there different?
So the admin could just ban it.
Is there different degrees of admins by any chance? Could that be a server-side thing?
There's an admin and there's a super admin.
Okay.
Super admins can do anything. They're the guys that started the server.
Okay, so a super admin can do the ban, but a regular admin can't?
I believe, I need to check. Okay. I have a feeling that a voted admin can still ban, but I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Maybe that's the issue then. Let me see. Some of the other stuff, just very, very quickly. People asking, Tribes 2 seems to do a floppy drive check. I can't verify that because I've never seen it, but a couple people are mentioning it. Is this something that you're aware of?
I was aware of it. It's fixed now.
It is fixed. So that's something.
It doesn't do that anymore.
That will be fixed in the next.
It was a silly thing where when we did the CD-ROM check, we essentially just kind of didn't think to start at C, and it was embarrassing. It's fixed now.
Okay. So that will be in the patch on Wednesday.
No, heck, I think that's out now.
Oh, you think it's out now? Okay, well, the guy that was asking about it, then make sure you patch your damn game. Sorry, well, he's asking like 10 times, and if it's already been fixed, then I don't know. Let me see. The other thing, people are asking, is there a way, or is there or isn't there, in-game for an admin to change the password for the server?
I'm not as familiar with the admin options as I should be.
Okay.
I believe that the only way to change the password is to start the game over.
Ah. Okay. That's like, just off the top of my head.
Just based upon a hallway conversation that I overheard. I need to go find out.
Okay. That is just, if that is the case, that is something I can probably tell you that you guys might want to look at, simply because it's typically a good thing to be able to change it on the fly.
Yeah.
So that might.
No, it's not a problem for us to do it. It's just that I don't think that you can currently do it.
Okay. Yeah, that would definitely be an issue I could see for admins. Let me see. I'm just trying to very quickly field some other stuff here. Slam. Okay. People ask me about the banning and the permanent banning. We talked about both. We did talk about the banning in game and the permanent banning. The permanent banning you mentioned will be that. Something that will be able to be done?
Dynamics will never release a script that allows permanent banning.
Okay.
However, I would guess that it will be available within a week of this broadcast because now people know it's possible.
Okay. Fair enough. So it's something they can do. All right. We'll leave it at that. They're smart people. They'll be able to figure it out. Let me see. Server password in game. We addressed. Messiah. They're having a pickup game tonight at 5150 Competition West at 10 o'clock PST. You've been invited to join that, by the way.
Cool.
That should be. They're usually a really good time. What is the issue that the emergency patch will fix?
Yeah, that was a real screwy thing. We had a pretty extensive test as far as tribes and stuff went in beta and NATA, but the trick was we didn't have guys with super long names joining like 7 or 8 or 9, even 10 tribes. And what was happening was, you know how we have you may not know, we have an authentication certificate that comes down from the authentication server every time, and it has all that information in it. Well, quite honestly, we didn't have enough space for all those letters. And so when somebody had a name like, Joe Bob, Billy Bob, Ellen Bob, and then he joined, disenfranchised turret farmers and, 5 other tribes that had really long names, it was overflowing the certificate link. So we fixed that right now, and the reason why we did the emergency patch where we essentially said, okay, nobody has more than 3 names is because that way we can guarantee that nobody gets over the link in the certificate. That's kind of embarrassing, but the trick is if you overfilled the certificate, then you could log in, but you couldn't do anything. You could never connect with the community, and you really couldn't get a lot of stuff done. So by doing this quick fix until the patch comes out, we guarantee that everybody will be able to play over the weekend, which we consider to be a good trade-off, considering the fact that it's really easy to rejoin tribes after we come out with the patch.
Okay.
Because not being able to play your own game sucks.
Yes.
So we want to make sure that didn't happen.
And there's some really odd ones, some odd questions that I'm trying to, like some really bizarre stuff, though. One of the, minor stuff. I'm trying to focus more on gameplay stuff, and I've got about 10 million private messages here.
I know the feeling.
in general, anything, I guess, that, and because, it's not often we get a chance like this to get on the show to sort of address the questions from the community. Just sort of any general things that you'd like to say to the folks that have been playing the game and have been involved in it. I don't know, just like an open chance to address the folks tuned in and listening.
I have had I've made a lot of games in my career. And a lot of times when I release a game, I play it for a week or two, and then I move on and I do other things. I've been playing this game since, all the way through beta, and now after release, I play it virtually every night when I come home. And it's not because I think it's a brilliant game or like the world's best game or anything like that. It's because I generally have a hell of a lot of time, a lot of fun playing with the people that are playing the game. we have a tough time in the forums, and there's a lot of people that like to take the name Cakes and Rain and shout at me and all that stuff. But quite honestly, we've got 115,000 people playing the game right now. At any given time, we've probably got 11 or 15,000 people logged into the game. And there's like 5,000 or 6,000 of them playing the game at any one time. And when you go in there, most people are having a really good time. And what I'd like to do is, most of our conversations nowadays, a lot of the publicity that we get in the press, and a lot of the forums and posts and everything like that are based on the negative connotations, because everybody would like to see a perfect game, including me. But the fact of the matter is, there's a hell of a lot of fun happening. And I'd really like people to be able to step back and go, yeah, this bug or that bug is kind of annoying, but look at the fact that this game is really fun. It's definitely worth the $50 you paid for it, and we're going to make it worth way more than any $50 you ever played for a game, or paid for a game. I look at this game to have the same kind of entertainment value and the same kind of commitment that you would get off of an online persistent world role-playing game. We want you to be playing this game for years. So we're going to work as hard as we can to make it happen. And so be patient with us and help us by being constructive, and we will turn this into your best gaming experience you've ever been around. That's it.
And that's a fair comment. And I'm going to continue on with a couple other real quick issues. If at any point you got to go, tell me and cut me off, and we'll end it. But just while I got you here, some of the other quick things I want to fire off. Been a lot of questions about the point system, and I mean, depending on some people, for some people points are important, for others they aren't. But there seems to be some questions on certain things, like some of the tools you have available, like a Shrike, for example. If you use the Shrike to chase down and kill people, or if you're the pilot in a bomber thing, and I think the logic behind the Tribes 2 point system was to award different levels of contributions outside of just caps and kills. Right. But there seems to be some areas where perhaps those contributions, things like piloting, like you could pilot a bomber all map and completely devastate the other team, but your pilot doesn't actually get any recognition for it. Right. Are those sort of things stuff that even factor in at this stage, or is that something down the road? There's a billion other things to take care of before that.
Scoring actively irritates me.
Okay.
I think that the team scoring, the individual games where you have the scoring is working really well. But there are a couple of little rough edges here and there. The team game scoring, the actual team scores, seem to be working very well. Although we're making a switch to capture the flag. I'll tell you about that in a minute. The individual scoring, well, I don't think any of us really realized how effective the vehicles were going to be, and so we just put in scoring for the vehicles. That will be addressed. There's a couple of things that we're already planning for the future, including things like statistic tracking, so that you'll be able to see all kinds of breakdowns. One of the things that I like to think about in Tribes 2 is that it has all the qualities of a sport, regardless of whether people treat it like a sport. And what I'd like to do is make statistics and stuff like that available so that, like if you're a really good defensive player, then you have this complete breakdown of the stats, and when you request an invitation into a tribe, you can actually prove that, look, I know my stuff. Look, I've played for this many minutes. I've repaired this many generators. I've been able to defend, successfully defend the flag this many times, so on and so forth. And I think that when we move that direction, people will be, all this, the flaws that we have in the individual scoring right now will go away. I was going to tell you about the capture the flag score.
Okay.
It's a very simple thing, but it's going to feel very strange to people that we're used to Tribes 1. We're doing a multiplier on the cap score, so essentially each cap is going to be worth 25 points.
Oh, good Lord.
That's enough to change because, what's the difference between 75 to 25, 3 to 1? No big deal there.
Well, that'll encourage people to go, get them the hell out of mortaring my own damn base. That's good.
Well, the reason why we did that change is because what we're going to do is we're going to give 1 point for flag touches, which means that if the flag is at its flag stand and you touch it, and you get it, essentially you grab it and get it away from the flag stand, you'll get 1 point. Even if you die. 3 steps away from the flag stand, you'll die, even if you only got a few feet. And that point will only be awarded if the flag was at the flag stand. And the reason why we're doing it is because pretty much everybody hates a tie. And this will be one way that will reward people that are aggressive about offense. You could end up with a game of being like 28 to 25, because each team got one cap, but the other team essentially got down into the base or managed to touch the flag more often. It's not enough points to actually make you be able to win that way. You'd have to touch the flag 25 times to equal one cap. But what it does do is kind of reward the teams that are aggressive about getting to that flag.
Interesting. Yeah, I understand exactly, and I think something like that is people might say points aren't important, etc. But the fact is, for a lot of people that play, points are important, and I think if there's people complain about the game being too defensive, I think a lot of the reason for that is a lot of the players are playing defense. So if there's things that are done to encourage people to take more offensive action, touch the flag, for example, you might see a transition from players playing defense to playing offense, and you might see a change in the game balance.
And you've probably heard about the MPB teleporter.
Yes. What's the deal with that? Because I've heard about that for a little while. First of all, explain what that is for people that aren't aware.
It's been tabled for right now.
Okay.
We have a lot of code in the game right now, but we need to essentially internally play test it quite a bit before we release it, because it will have a very major impact on the game. And because it has such a high impact, it may not actually ever see the light of day. But the concept is this. The mobile point base is a pretty effective vehicle as it is right now. But one of the things that people have always wanted the MPB to be able to do is have its own spawn sphere. So that when an MPB is out in the middle of the field, you could die and then spawn at the MPB, so that essentially you could be closer to the enemy base. Well, that's a real logistical nightmare, so we decided not to do that. But after we were talking about it for a while, we decided that one of the things that could stimulate offense would be to set it up so that when an MPB rolls out into the field and deploys, then what happens is a teleporter pad back at the vehicle station, it's always going to be at the vehicle station, would activate, and anybody that stepped into that would teleport so that they were in a random location around the MPB itself out in the field. And this would only be available when it's fully deployed. That has all kinds of ramifications on the gameplay, and that's one of the reasons why we need to test the hell out of it. But what it would allow people to do is quick strike with offense from a closer range. And I think that it would really liven up CTF games, especially, actually mostly CTF games. There'd be basically a CTF functionality. I don't think there's that many CNH or Siege games that would affect dramatically. It's an interesting idea. It's the kind of shake-up that we're looking to do in the game later on. This is not a static game. We don't intend the way it came out of the box to be the way it is for all time, and we'll always consider seemingly radical game ideas like this. But I think that one might work. We just have to see if it's too abusive.
Now, I want to get back to that, but I'm getting fired questions here. Rumors going around from some of the news site guys, notably Imposter from Tribal War and Kelster from Planet Starsiege, hearing that there is a planned PlayStation 2 port of Tribes 2. Can you confirm or deny that?
I can neither confirm nor deny that rumor.
Okay. All right, well, at least I asked the question, so you can neither confirm nor deny, so that's not a yes nor a no.
I have a gag order on that subject. I'm sorry. I apologize. Normally I'm forthcoming, but I don't have anything to do with a project of that kind.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not a no.
Right.
I'll just point out for people that aren't proficient at reading between the lines, because on a related theme, you and I talked earlier this week about this rumor that there is a Palm PC version of Tribes 2 in the works, and I asked you about that rumor.
All I can say is I forget the guy's name that writes for the Tribes Universe the front page, but he's a funny guy. A Palm Pilot version of Tribes 2? Are you kidding me?
And that was so the answer for that version was definitely a no, but on the PS2 version you said neither yes nor no. So that's so there's a subtle difference there. Let me see some of the other stuff. Let me see. And it's actually IGN that's saying that PS2 rumor, just for your own information. Now, let me see. I'm going to give one more last call for quick questions, because we've had you on the phone here for an hour and a half, and some specific... Now, people are asking me, what about specific hardware and software questions? Like, what about, memory leaks in Windows 2000? What about performance with an ATI Radeon? I don't want to get into that sort of specific stuff, simply because I'm trying to address sort of the larger issues. I mean, what we're trying to do for the folks listening is to get as much mileage out of something like this and make it as much use to as many people as possible. Oh, tech noise. Yes, that's a question I did want to ask. There's a lot of eye candy in Tribes 2. And obviously this is something you guys spent a lot of time on. Because there is, so many different levels of systems, one of the things that I've noticed is with a game, for example, like Quake 3, an OpenGL type game, there is a large list of settings that you can tweak to turn things down. And you and I, met a few times at GDC, and we saw Cornelia playing the GameSpy Quake 3 professional player, and we saw the way she's got her game tweaked, which is basically running ugly, but she's getting like 3,000 frames per second. Tribes 2, right now there's a lot of stuff, for example, smoke effects and damage effects, etc., on vehicles, that for the people perhaps with lower end systems, being able to turn that sort of thing off may possibly help them. Is there, well, first of all, and I guess is a multi-pronged question, will there be ways for them to do that? Because I've gone through the client pref CS, and it's kind of limited what you can and can't turn off. So will there be more ways to tweak things, or is that just sort of a myth? Would turning off those sort of things really do anything significant to frame rate?
But it depends upon your video card. Essentially, particle systems, when you're turning them down, which is what you're talking about when you're talking about explosions and smoke and all that stuff, that's particle systems. Particle systems, there's only two things about them that matter. One of them is the fact that they're generally alpha blended, so that they're translucent. You can see through them partially. And one of them is how many polygons are in the effect. Now, we've done some preliminary benchmarking on it. This is actually a topic that Brian Ramage, who's the special effects programmer, and myself have been discussing. Right now, we have the opinion that it really wouldn't make that much difference. However, on lower-end cards, like, older cards like a VD2 or something like that, alpha blending did used to make a difference. So we could look into it for those cards. But usually, alpha blending only makes a difference when it covers a large part of the screen. So like if you were in the middle of an explosion and there was alpha-blended particles covering most of your screen, then you might see a slowdown. But usually that's only for a frame or two before that goes away and then you're back to normal. When the explosions are any distance away from you, they're only a small percentage of the screen, and they're not that big a deal. So what we might do is we might experiment with that, put in some console things for us to test with, turn that down and see if it makes any impact. And we're going to be doing that very soon. As far as the polygons go, well, most of our effects just flat don't have that many polygons in relation to the number of players and weapons and vehicles and terrain and trees and everything else that's out there. So what I'm trying to say is that the percentage of polys from special effects is actually fairly low. And being able to scale that down really won't do much for you. But yeah, hey, any port in a storm, we'll look into it.
What are, and just in general you obviously more knowledgeable about the game than most people, what are some of the quick fixes in terms of in-game stuff that people can do to, and I know you've addressed this, and for the people that don't know, there's sections of troubleshooting and sort of an FAQ inside the game for graphic settings to adjust and whatnot, but maybe you can cover some of the things here very, very, very quickly. What are some of the stuff that people can do to maybe get a little bit more performance or get, better optimize the game for their systems?
One of the first things I do when I want performance on a lower-end computer is turn down the terrain texture detail.
Terrain texture detail, okay.
Yeah, I want to be specific about this. There's terrain detail, which is the polygons, and there's terrain texture detail, which is the size of the texture on those polygons. Turn down the texture detail, not the other one.
Okay.
Actually, I lie. Turn them both down.
Turn them both down.
Yeah, what terrain texture detail, just so that people understand it, is there's really, okay, there's two things that are going to slow you down. One of them is the number of polys that are out there, and the second one is the amount of textures that you have in RAM, video RAM. Okay. When you get too many textures on your card, like if your card can't handle that many textures, then you start to get what's called texture thrash, where it's loading and unloading on your card all the time. So if that's happening, like if you have a low-end video card, then turning down your textures, your texture detail and all those categories is going to help your card not get bottlenecked on that particular. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing is, if there's a lot of polygons on the screen, then usually the factor that limits you there is your CPU speed. So if you have a low-end CPU speed, what you want to do particularly is to turn down the number of polygons on your screen, and that's done not on the texture screen, but on the graphics screen, the option screen. And that's things like the terrain detail, which will, if you turn that down, you'll see the terrain growing as you pass over it. That's because essentially there's a lower res polygon mesh being used, which means a lot less polygons are being drawn. And you can turn down your shape detail and some of those other ones. And it makes your game look pretty ugly, but the fewer polys you have on a lower-end CPU, the faster your game is going to be.
Okay.
So if you're worried about textures, like you don't have enough video memory, then turn down the textures. If you don't have enough megahertz on your CPU, then turn down the polys. And that's a rule of thumb. That, and if you turn off the music, you'll probably get some frames back.
Now, and I mean, you mentioned like the flames and whatnot, you've seen the forums. What is your general reaction to the people that just sort of unabashedly say, T2 sucks, it's not T1, you've messed up the game? So the people that sort of throw it down in that respect, what's your general response? I mean, you've said a few times that you like the game, but for that section of the Tribes 1, and it's Tribes 1 veterans, it's a group of them, and maybe it's a small group or whatnot, but they're vocal and they're people that have influence. So how do you respond to that general challenge?
It's a completely. What I have to do is I have to remind myself constantly that their opinion is completely legitimate. There's nothing wrong with their opinion. Everybody has an opinion, and they're right. I don't care what their opinion is, they're right. For them, they're not having fun. There's a large segment of our gaming population here that does like the game. I get letters all the time. Usually, unfortunately, in private. They don't post publicly because they don't want to get flamed. But I get tons of email from people saying that they're excited about the game, they're really enjoying it, so on and so forth. And it's what kind of keeps me working. If I went by just what was on the forums, maybe I'd be a ditch digger.
Yeah.
But everybody wants something different from the game. Quite honestly, I love this game because there's always been this holy grail of the game industry to come up with a combined arms game. It has air vehicles and ground vehicles and infantry and all this stuff. And it's been tried many times, but I think that this is the first time that it's actually worked. It's a different game than Tribes 1. It's built on the same core. It has a lot of the same flavors. Some of the stuff is exactly the same, but there have been some gameplay changes to accommodate that vision. And so sometimes I have to say, well, gee, there's not much I can do about it. We made this game, not that other game. But on the other hand, when those guys are being constructive instead of just destructive, like some guys just get on the bitch, and that's fine. They're letting off steam, and that's fine. But other guys will say, look, I don't like it as well as I did the other one because I was able to do this, that, and the other thing in the other game, and I'm unable to do that in Tribes 2. And what we do at that point is look at those comments and say, well, okay, so what they really wanted to be able to do wasn't necessarily heavy O. What they may really be complaining about is because they can't cowboy it. Is there something we can do to make them happier? And if there is, and it fits in the rest of the vision, well, hell, we'll put it in. We want everybody to be able to play the game. It's just that currently we don't have that. We haven't gotten to the point where we can feel good about making changes like that. The game is still definitely being learned by the players and is definitely still shaking out.
The couple other quick ones here before I let you go. Blue Nose from Vanguard, and Vanguard is
I know Blue Nose.
You know Blue Nose. So he's made a challenge to the dev team. He would like the dev team, you talk about sort of the balance and that you guys have no problem capping. So as sort of a test and a bit of a challenge, he would like to set up a game between the dev team and Vanguard. So
we're gonna get our ass kicked.
Well, I think his idea is, when you mentioned that, you guys have no problem in terms of the balance and whatnot, I think his response is, well, depending on the quality of the team you're playing, his point is that he feels that the game is maybe defensively oriented, and against a certain caliber team that they can make, and some of the rumor, or some of the feeling is that you can make a map uncappable. So anyway, as a bit of an exhibition or a bit of a challenge, and if you know Blue Nose, you guys might want to look at this. It could be something fun to do, at least as an experiment. Maybe in private, but just in terms of a balancing issue. Vanguard would like to play the dev team in a game. So that's
we're going to need a little bit of time to really orchestrate the team before we take on Vanguard.
One of the other things that okay, hold on a second. Where the hell did that question go?
But I hear what he's saying. I'm serious. What we could possibly do is that might be a little bit easier to handle is maybe have a chat room discussion with Vanguard, and we can sit down and talk about theory.
Okay.
And then if we come up with new stuff that Vanguard hasn't considered, then maybe we can go try that out, or maybe we can skirmish a little bit. But like a serious team game, us versus you guys, well, you guys practice together a hell of a lot more than we do. We play the game a lot, but most of the time we don't play as a team. It's only when we sit down and try to play as a team that we actually do. Most of the time we're just screwing around and having fun.
Okay, and I think that's a valid thing. I mean, well, Blue Nose, and Blue Nose knows how to get a hold of you. So I mean, I think that sort of stuff and that sort of input from an organized team, I think would be valuable. So it's nice to hear that you're open to that. One of the other issues.
Absolutely.
One of the other issues I want to talk to you about, it's just getting a lot of attention, and of course, as a community, people feel that bond, is the issue of the layoffs and the issue of some of the guys, that the people have been aware of since Tribes 1, with the migration from Dynamics to Garage Games. The issue with the layoffs, first of all, is that I think one of the first signals that goes up is people feel, well, hold on a second, there are still some issues with the game. They're still developing the game, and they're letting people go. Why is that? Is that a good thing, or is that a bad thing, or is that a bad sign?
I don't know how to say this without sounding unfriendly.
Okay.
So I'll try to say it with a smile in my voice.
Okay.
But the private business of Dynamics is Dynamics' private business.
Okay.
I am not going to discuss why there were layoffs or why certain people were laid off, and I'm certainly not going to try to guess what Garage Games is doing with its business as opposed to what Dynamics is doing with theirs. That is just not something I'm comfortable discussing in a public forum.
Okay.
I will say this. We have a very solid, very good team remaining even after that situation. The guys are really excited to make the franchise grow. They all want this to be the best game that's ever been created. And even the guys that left, I think everybody that left has a really good attitude. There's still the possibility that they might get brought back in the future. I'm not sure whether that's going to happen or not. But we left under amicable terms. I don't think anybody went away pissed off, as has happened at Dynamics in past situations. And that's really all I'm comfortable about saying right now.
So how many? How about in this spin on it? And how many people are still on the Tribes 2 team in terms of support and working on it?
There's 16 people on the team.
Okay, well, so that's still a pretty significant team then.
Oh yeah. That's a very good team for support and continued refinement on the game. When we go and we're doing what is still being termed the next big thing, whatever that game is, we'll almost certainly have to ramp up again.
Some of the other quick ones, I know I keep saying that, but is there any plan to address the fact that you can totally block the flag with inventories?
Yeah, that's fixed in the next patch.
That's fixed. How is that being fixed in the next patch? Is there
remote inventory stations have interference radiuses on them, just like turrets do.
Oh, okay. So you can't deploy a turret right next to a flag because it's another object. Same thing with inventories.
No, you can deploy one turret next to a flag, but you won't be able to deploy. You will be able to place one inventory station next to a flag, but you won't be able to place multiple ones right next to a flag.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's really interesting. Because that'll factor in a bunch of different maps.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's nice that one's there. And now I'm assuming that is something that would be an example of not to put words in your mouth, but of listening to sort of feedback from the players, seeing the way the game is going and reacting to it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, we didn't even know about that till somebody sent us a letter and said, "Dude, this sucks." And we're like, "Oh wow, that really does suck. Yeah, let's fix that."
I know one of the ones where it really sort of came up on most common was Deathbird's Fly, which has got the flag semi-indoors on that little sort of walkway above the base, and you can.
Oh right, yeah. That would be a good place to do that.
Oh God, it was irritating. I mainly play defense, so it was handy, but yeah, irritating. Let me see.
Yeah, well, you remember when we changed the shape of the beacon?
Yes. Oh, that's true.
We did that for the same reason. People were putting those old beacons, the chutes and everything like that. You couldn't even get up the chute.
Yeah, and that's what's really kind of funny is people don't realize that, and I mean, one of the things that the other sort of, I mean, you guys mentioned that you get flamed as well. I think a lot of the beta and meta testers, although they couldn't really so much get flamed individually, were getting flamed collectively for, didn't you guys, catch this bug or whatever. I think what people don't know is they don't realize how many bugs did get fixed in the whole beta and meta process, and Dave mentions one there on something like, not Tombstone. What the hell's the other desert? The Desert of Death one with no inventories. I'm pulling a blank on it.
Dust to Dust.
Dust to Dust, where you have to sort of go up a chute to get into the flag stand. The beacons used to be so big that you could stick some beacons in there and you'd never be able to get up that chute. So that's sort of the stuff that was caught. There'd be other stuff that wasn't, of course, but there were a lot of bugs that were fixed in exploits and whatnot that were fixed in beta and meta.
Yep.
Let me see. Quick question about the map editor. When will the map editor be unlocked so people can make new maps?
Unlocked?
I don't know what he means. I thought you already could make new maps because people are releasing them.
Well, if you can't, I don't know about it. So if you can't make new maps, somebody send me an email. Oh God, don't do that. Never mind. I would say it. Otherwise I'll have 100 emails in my box tomorrow. Let's see, somebody, well, I'll just look into it. I will try to find out if there's an issue there, but as far as I know, you should be able to create new maps.
Yeah, and other people are saying that too. I mean, I'm fielding this from IRC, and there's not a lot of stuff that I've done, so I don't know. Some people are saying you can, some people are saying you can't, but I thought you could because there has been new maps released, so that would assume to me the map editor is unlocked.
Well, you may remember from before we released, one of the things that I've always been big on is supporting the mod community and helping out scripters and everything like that. And quite honestly, we've been so ass-kicking busy recently that we haven't been able to do that as well as we wanted to after release. Now we're starting to get our head above water again. I think that in the next week or two, those communities can expect more attention from us, and we'll be able to look at some of the, like I have a list of about 10 things that various modsters have sent to me about some of the problems that they're encountering. And we'll be starting to nail that list as soon as we can, probably in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, I'm getting clarification on the map thing. People are saying that you have to edit an existing map, as opposed to...
I believe them. I'll have to go look at it.
Okay. All right. So this is... We address what is up with the ping jumping around. I have no idea what that means. But one question I did have in relation to ping was I've noticed that my in-game performance in terms of frames per second and whatnot will decrease if I'm on a server where I ping higher, or if it's a server that's not quite as robust as others. Is that a valid observation, or is that another myth?
No, it's a totally valid observation. What happens is, if a server, let's say that somebody, let's say somebody's being silly and they got a 500 megahertz CPU out there and they're running a 64-player game. Well, that's not going to perform very well because what the server is essentially doing is it's listening to all 64 of those players, taking all of their information, processing it all, making sure that everything is accurate, and then spitting it back out to all the different players every single tick of the game. Okay? So if you're going to run a high player server, you need to have a high megahertz CPU. So that's not a myth at all. If you're going to run a 500 megahertz CPU out there as a server, you probably should consider 24 players or less. And if you're running a 64-player machine, you should probably be at least a gig. That's just a rule of thumb. As far as the ping jumping around, I'm not sure exactly what that fellow means, but I do know that a lot of people have misadjusted their network settings. And that is not their fault. Our network settings are not incredibly intuitive. What I suggest to most people is to, I don't care what your throughput is, but for right now, go ahead and just set it to 56K modem. You probably won't notice any difference in your game except that you won't see any red jacks. You shouldn't see any red jacks at that point. And what you can do is just, as you play, you can slide those sliders up a little farther each time until you essentially start to see a little bit of jerkiness. If you start to see little hitches in your gameplay and everything like that, turn it back down again. And we'll adjust those. But for right now, it's better safe than sorry. You're really not going to see that much difference with a lower setting.
One of the for the people that, and on that subject, for the people that are sort of network setting savvy, that do things like tweak your max MTU settings and whatnot, and as someone that's kind of a tweak freak myself, I find one of the issues that's a little frustrating is having to deal with a slider without a numeric input, or without a numeric value attached to it. Is there going to be any way that those network settings and those sliders, you might be able to adjust them with more precision? For example, a numeric readout over top of it for what it is?
Right. One of the things we want to do is give you more in-game feedback about what's going on with packet loss and ping, as opposed to just the red jack, which is a really coarse indicator. So we'll be doing that, and then yes, at the same time that we give you that kind of indicator, we'll also go through and adjust the interface for network settings.
Okay.
And yeah, it should be numeric at that point. Probably be a slider with numeric.
I have.
Because most people don't know what the hell the numeric stuff means.
True, that's true. But for the people that do, I think it's a handy thing. I mean,
most important, I think the presets there needs to be more presets.
Okay.
And I think they need to be accurate. I think right now they're not adjusted very well, and that's why I'm suggesting to people that they just go ahead and use the 56K setting, and then if they know what they're doing and they know what packet rate is and all that stuff is, then they can adjust those manually. But otherwise, just leave it at 56K. You're not going to notice the difference.
Now, there was mention before, and I remember you mentioning this either in the forums or in one of the news releases or whatnot, that NVIDIA was going to be sending, or they were going to be sending, or did send an engineer over to help you guys work with, doing some real funky things with T2 for the GeForce 3. What's the status? Is that something that has happened? Is happening? Is going to happen? Might happen?
Yeah, Chris came out from NVIDIA this week and worked with a special effects programmer and a couple of our senior programmers and talked about what we could or couldn't do in in T2. And that wasn't a Freudian slip. We're not working on T3. Just want to say that out loud. He talked about what we could do with the GF3 and some of the cool things we could do. We discussed. We had essentially a small brainstorming session about it. We may get some assistance from NVIDIA once they're going to give us a card, but currently we don't have a GF3 card to play with. And as soon as we do, we'll probably start monkeying with it. But I wouldn't expect to see any large improvements on that for a while. But yeah, definitely we have plans for the GF3. It's a cool card.
Now, so have you guys had a chance to get your hands on on sort of a developer's copy and get your stuff tested with it?
Chris came out with it. We have not benchmarked our game on the GF3 at all. Like I said, we don't currently have a card.
Okay. Another one here, Mr. E from Void asking, why are custom skins not visible to everyone till the map changes if you join the server after map start, and if that will be something that will be addressed?
Yeah.
We're getting pretty specific, but
Okay. I don't know.
I know in Tribes 1...
You'll have to look into that.
In Tribes 1, I know the way it happened was if you joined and you had a custom skin, you usually had to die and respawn for it to sort of take. But what
that totally doesn't make any sense, though. That would be a bug.
Okay.
The fact of the matter is we haven't done a lot of experimentation with custom skins yet. And in fact, we haven't really facilitated the custom skin plan for the users. We're going to set up a centralized downloading site. People will be able to submit their skins to us once they're essentially verified as being pornography and drug-free.
Yes.
We can put them up on the central download site for everybody to get. People can download that stuff. We also have some other plans for some tribal customization even without specific download skins that will allow people to be able to see tribes at a glance. So, yeah, they can expect a lot of improvement in that area soon. But for right now, we just quite frankly haven't put any attention on customized skins.
And let me see. I don't know. I'm getting a lot of sort of specific, very specific hardware questions that I don't really want to get into too much. One of the other. I think okay. Maybe we should look at wrapping up. Is there anything else that's come out of this that you want to address that I haven't brought up specifically?
No, not right off the bat. I'm looking forward to. I'm really looking forward to the future. It's easy for me to look and see where Tribes 2 is going to be. And so sometimes I think maybe I have a little bit of a different impression of what this game really is because I know what's going to happen. I know what we're going to do with the leagues and the ladders and making team gaming easier and more accessible and setting it up so you can see statistics and you can see what's going on with, being able to set up leagues so that you can have seasons of play and be able to be a really great team at a certain game type. And there's just a ton of stuff we're going to do, but it's not done yet. So right now, when I go in and play, and I see the potential for where we're going, and even though I consider it a very fun game right now, what it's going to be is going to be phenomenal. And right now, I guess you guys all just have to take that with a grain of salt and trust me or don't trust me according to how you feel. But we got a long road ahead of us, and a lot of it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. That's pretty much what I have to say.
The people are asking, one of the favorite things about Tribes 1 was the freedom to customize the chat menu, basically doing anything you want. That seems to have been altered a little bit, and I realize because part of it would be the fact that the sort of command acknowledged and whatnot are worked into the waypointing automatically, but what are some of the things that people can and can't do with the chat menu? Is that sort of level of I noticed one of the things when you go into the in-game chat menu customization, you can change everything except the actual text that's displayed, which I think would be one of the things that people seem to be wanting to change the most.
The text what? Oh, you mean the voice binds?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, it's coming. It's one of those things that we want to change too. All I can say is that's not high on the list, but it's something that we want to fix.
Now, for these things that you've said, and some of the IRC, the naysayers, like, well, it's all sort of we're working on this, it's coming. In general, and I know you hate dates, but what sort of timelines are you looking at for these issues, for the things that we'll consider known issues, right? The stuff that you're aware of, things like the chat menu, things like the flag bug, that sort of stuff of which you're voicing that you're aware. What do you see as the timeline? And I realize some of them will be fixed sort of intermediately between those timelines, but what's the sort of timeline for generally the majority of those issues getting wrapped up?
It's not me being tired of dates, but until I put more thought into exactly what order we're going to get this stuff done in, which when I say we're working on the add-on, what we're really working on is what order are the rollout features going to be completed along the road towards completion. Like, we know what we want to do in this box product down the line, right?
Right.
But there's all kinds of stuff that we want to do along the way to keep people interested in the game, make it more exciting, make it easier to play, doing all this stuff that's essential to get done before we get to the rollout. And a lot of the stuff that we talked about tonight is those rollout features. And one of the things that I'm doing in the process of being able to plan that add-on is figuring out what order and exactly when we intend to roll that stuff out. Now, what I can do, I probably will never tell you dates. I've just been burned on that so many times in my career that I won't do it anymore.
Right.
But what I probably will be able to make public is the order of things the order that we intend to accomplish things in. And I'm saying that right now without thinking it through too much, but I think that we should be able to do something like that and be able to help set people's expectations about, like, when this thing is done, they'll start working on this other thing. I don't have any problem with selling stuff like that.
Okay, and I mean, that was sort of, I guess, one of my earlier questions about what are the higher priority issues. So where would people look to get that sort of information on what the big hit issues are? Would that be something that would be posted on the in-game news?
Yeah, the news with that before anything else did.
I think something like that would be really well received. I think one of the issues, and I realize that you've been in Korea. How was Korea, by the way?
Korea was phenomenal. I wish that gamers here and in Europe, well, let's put it this way. Korea is a very social country. They play games together on a rabid basis. There's also some statistics about Korea that people don't realize here in the States. One of them is there's like 40 million people over there, and 40 million of them have high-speed internet bandwidth connections. So that's 50% penetration of high-speed internet connections.
That's amazing.
The other one is they don't get along with Japan very well. They don't allow Japanese imports. Therefore, there's no console gaming there. Well, there's no legal console gaming. So the vast majority of these people with high-speed bandwidth connections are all PC gamers. And they have these things called PC game rooms, which are sort of like an arcade, where people pay a monthly fee, and then there's like 25 to 100 machines all in one room, and people go to those things like they would go to a bar or to a movie. Every night they go there and they hang out, and the guys play games, and the gals do web browser, or they play different games, and it's a very social atmosphere. And because of that, their gaming community is gigantic. Next month they're going to be doing a celebration for something like the 2 millionth unit of StarCraft sold in just Korea.
Wow.
Yeah, they're really impressive. And I was completely ignorant of it before I went over there.
Well, and that's the sort of stuff
that
I think
was a real eye-opening experience for me.
Bacchus wants to know if you ate any kimchi.
I did, about 5 or 6 times.
I don't even know who she is, but it's... One of the other... Because I think, just as a general observation, and this is working towards the wrap-up, that I think you're a bit of a victim, if I can say that, of the own precedent that you've set, which is an impressive record of communicating with people on the forums and letting them know what's going on. Part of that because the Tribes One community considerably smaller, considerably more concentrated, and a number of different things. And I think some of the issues that, just in my observations that I'm seeing, well, what about this? What about this? There's a lot of questions, and I think it's just a thirst for information. And I know Imposter and the Tribal War guys are begging for you to come back to the forums and address some of the stuff, and they're eager to see you. And I think that seems to be a lot of the response that we're getting. And when you mention things like, we'll put out a list of the top issues that we're working on, and I think the community, at least the Tribes 1 community that's carried over into Tribes 2, has gotten used to that kind of feedback, as silly as that might sound, because you don't usually get that feedback from a developer. But at the same stage, you've set that table. So I think they've gotten used to that level of feedback, and to a certain extent, because you guys have been busy and you're promoting the game and doing the career thing, they feel a little bit kind of out in the cold and aren't as aware as they typically are of some of the things that are being worked on. So that might be just, maybe it's a communication issue. At least knowing then what you guys are working on alleviates some of the concerns.
I think it's a hell of a good idea, and I will do it. It's difficult for me to maintain the extremely personal conversations that I had before we released, quite honestly, because the community is so gigantic. now, and getting bigger all the time, and hopefully it won't stop growing for some time. But what was really stunning about after we released was that people that want to cause trouble or like to gripe will always outpost the people that like something. The people that like something are busy playing it, or they just don't want to get flamed by the people that are being trolls or whatever. And so essentially, when there are some major issues, and there were major issues when we released, the flames got out of control. And at that point, what I realized was that I was wasting my time spending large amounts of hours in those forums. Because no matter how much I posted, or how reasonable I was, or even when I was successful in getting people to understand what was going on, as soon as I walked away, 20 more posts of the exact same flame happened, and all of a sudden what I had said got completely lost. And so that was unfortunate, and I had to pull back from a lot of forums into the internal forums, because at least there I had a fighting chance to keep up.
Right.
But the news articles are a really good idea. I should post what we're working on so that people understand what we're working on, because quite honestly, I'm the same way. I like to know what the hell's going on, and when I don't know what's going on, I get a little pissed off. So, yeah, we'll work on that. We'll make that happen.
All right. I think that would be really positive. Well, sir,
I agree.
I've had you on the phone for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and thank you very much. I'll let you go. Went a little longer than I planned on, but thanks again, Dave. I think for taking the time. I think we got some good information out. Again, as you mentioned, there will always be naysayers, and no, we can't answer every question. I'm going to take a screenshot of my IRC screen for the folks of you that are asking why I haven't answered your IRC private message. And I think we got some issues out, some of the specific issues, like, well, what about this particular hardware configuration? Given the context of this discussion, hopefully you understand why we haven't been able to ask those questions. But again, thanks a lot, and hopefully we'll get you on the show again soon when you got some time, and just get the word out. So thank you again for taking the time and joining us.
Thanks, Bob.
All right, thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, Sean.
Take care. And Dave,
Thank you for using Dialpad.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, there we go. Dave Georgeson from Dynamics Kicks, spending 2 hours and 15 minutes with us here on TSN, the Tribes Shoutcast Network.
You're listening to TSN, the leader in Tribes broadcasting. Yeah!